Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. Team USA defeats Team Sweden 2-1 in overtime in the quarterfinals of the 2026 Winter Olympics, thanks to a goal by Quinn Hughes after New York Ranger Mika Zibanejad tied it for Sweden with about a minute and a half left in regulation. A lot to discuss here, and I, said that I wanted to, do um, episodes on games that were important. It's, AKA knockout round. The preliminary round, that's, really just jockeying for position. And we'll discuss kind of the implications of that. There really was one big one that kind of led to this matchup, and also Ranger involvement. You don't get any more than that, than this exact matchup, which we thought might take place maybe later in the tournament. It happens in the quarterfinals. And of course, it's, Team USA with JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck and Mike Sullivan, the head coach, even, David Quinn, the assistant coach, and Chris Drury, the assistant GM, against Mika Zibanejad of Team Sweden. That's really exclusively the Ranger representation in this. And boy, is there a lot that comes out of this that really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, right? I mean, these are a lot of the things I'm going to say are things that I've been kind of harping on all season. It really is trends continuing. But I guess just speaking on the Olympics, what a day it was as far as the quarterfinals were concerned. Really the 8 teams that were at this juncture were the ones that you'd expect. The order was a little bit different, really mainly Sweden and Slovakia. They were in Group B with Finland. And the big surprise is that Slovakia ends up winning that group and getting a bye and getting the 3 seed. And it was very close to Sweden securing that. But in the game between Sweden and Slovakia, the last game in that group between those two teams, Slovakia scores a late goal, and that made all the difference in the world, because then, tiebreakers come into play, goal differential. So we're not going to get deep into what happened there, but the point is that really was pretty important, because now USA's next opponent, which we'll talk about, is actually Slovakia. They beat Germany in their quarterfinal matchup. And really, you would have thought that it would have probably been, in a 3-6 Sweden versus Germany. And then this game may have been USA versus Slovakia in a 2-7 matchup. That would have felt more right based on pedigree and these rosters. But that was really the one big surprise, I guess. And look, it's such a small sample size, anything can happen. But as far as, Canada finishing #1, USA 2, some of the other stuff, Finland always finding a way. We'll talk about them always finding a way to kind of get what they need. It's not pretty, but they get it done. They lock up the last bye, the #4 seed. But yeah, everything else was, again, kind of as expected. And what a day it was. I mean, Slovakia handles Germany, which Germany really wasn't all that impressive in Group C. They were in the same group as USA. Germany, they have a lot of high-end talent, with, Leon Draisaitl being the big one, but not really much depth to speak of. And Slovakia, even though they were a small underdog, it was really close. Out of all the 4 games going in, it was actually the one that was the most even, and yet it was by far the most lopsided. And then the final 3 games all went to overtime. 3-on-3 overtime, I should add. And that's a little bit tough. I understand in the preliminary round, go 3-on-3, that makes sense. That's fine. But let it at least be 4-on-4, for it to be decided that way isn't great to me. And again, I'm not even saying you got to go 5-on-5. I think 4-on-4 is kind of a happy medium there. But I'll put it this way. I would prefer 5-on-5 more than 3-on-3, especially when it gets to the gold medal game. That's 3-on-3 as well. The only difference is it's 20 minutes instead of the 10 minutes that it is here. And in all cases, in the games went to overtime, it was all decided in the 3-on-3, which is kind of expected. With this type of talent, 3-on-3, that's going to happen. And the teams that had the greater talent won all those games. Canada, in a classic, beats Czechia. I mean, that would have been just an absolute stunner, massive upset that didn't come to be. And you know what? Honestly, for the betterment of the rest of the tournament, I'm fine with it. It would have been a really cool upset. And very unexpected, but to get that potential Canada USA gold medal game, that's really kind of what we're all hoping for. Even though in a vacuum, obviously, that would have been quite the upset. But Canada finds a way, a tie it late, and then Mitch Marner gets the winner overtime in that game. And then Finland against Switzerland. Switzerland, who really has been very impressive, even losing Kevin Fiala to injury, which is a tough break for the LA Kings and Artemi Panarin as well. But Switzerland was up 2-0 with maybe a little more than 6 minutes left, and Finland finds a way to tie the game, including a goalie pull situation. So kind of similar to Sweden, except they were down 2-0. And they get a goal by Sebastian Aho to make it 2-1. And then I believe it was Miro Heiskanen that tied it up. And then they win in overtime on a goal by Arturi Lehkonen, who's been such a clutch player, whether it be with Montreal or Colorado. So the favorites find a way in those games to win. And the same with USA. And, this is one that obviously we're going to focus on. I've got a lot of Ranger angles to kind of discuss here. And this is kind of, this is the first time that I've really discussed Team USA and what has happened so far. So, we'll give it a little bit of kind of a preview before kind of going into what happened in this game. But USA, the opponents weren't all that difficult in the first three games. They beat Latvia, Denmark, and Germany. Look, it's not like it's an Italy or a France, right? It's not like it's a total joke by any means. And, I would say that maybe they got better as time went on in those three games. I thought the last game against Germany was probably their most complete game, but they also didn't have to play that well, and the stakes weren't through the roof. So it's tough to evaluate so much. It's more so on an individual basis. And, JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck have had pretty consistent roles, which is basically where JT Miller has mainly played with Brock Nelson and Jack Hughes. And Vincent Trocheck has been the 13th forward who has kind of slotted in on that line at times, on the Dylan Larkin line at times. I guess you'd consider, but I think it's close. The Larkin line is line 3 and the Brock Nelson line is line 4. But again, I'll term it as bottom 6. So, to me, JT Miller has played about 12 to 13 minutes a night, where Vincent Trocheck more 9 to 10 minutes a night. I didn't check the ice time on this game. That's kind of what it's been. And Trocheck and Miller have been the number 1 penalty kill unit as well, which was kind of expected. Those guys have really not done a whole lot. And again, I know it's what their role is offensively. JT Miller, it just doesn't look good. And, I don't think he deserved to make the team. We'll get to things that he did in this game, but again, going into it, I thought the best he looked was probably right in the beginning of the first game against Latvia. He had an assist taken off the board on an offside where he set up his former teammate Quinn Hughes for a goal. And then ironically, he was on for another potential goal, but he himself had goalie interference. And really since then, I don't think that JT Miller, look, the speed is not there for him at all. Not that he was ever a burner, but again, I hope he's hurt. I really, really do, because he just stands out as not looking good, but his role will continue. It just will, as this sort of, again, fourth line guy who kills penalties. He's blocked some shots, so the effort is there, as you'd hope it would be in a situation like this. But, again, he is clearly one of their worst forwards for sure. And Vincent Trocheck, who is depended upon as the face-off guy, we saw it in overtime actually as well. He lost the first one, won the second one. And Trocheck, I think he's looked a little bit better than Miller. Again, also Trocheck is clearly one of the, lower end guys on this, Team USA squad. But Vincent Trocheck with a couple of assists. One was a secondary one, I believe, in the first game. Another one was a primary, I think, in the second game. But, again, he hasn't played a whole lot, but these are guys that really aren't in danger of being a healthy scratch based on their sort of penalty kill defensive type role, which again, for me, there's holes in that, but that's like a whole nother conversation. So as far as this game goes, the healthy scratch forward was Kyle Connor. He played the first two games. If you remember in the Four Nations tournament, he was actually a healthy scratch for Chris Kreider. It brings up a point of there should have been a place for a Jason Robertson or a Cole Caulfield on this team for Kyle Connor, potentially. or Clayton Keller. And then, of course, there's the Miller Trocheck conversation. Again, it's different roles, though, right? So I think there's many different people you could select from. But in terms of keeping it from an offensive standpoint, Clayton Keller in this game played the first period with Larkin, Dylan Larkin, and Tage Thompson, and then didn't play again. They moved up Jack Hughes, deservedly so. Jack Hughes has looked very, very dynamic and dangerous, and he got moved to that line. And then, therefore, Vincent Trocheck kind of had a full time role on the line with Brock Nelson and JT Miller. Um, and I would expect next game, probably Kyle Connor to be back in there, and maybe he becomes. I don't know what happens there. Does Trocheck become 13th forward again? Is Connor the 13th forward? And look, in my opinion, I think JT Miller deserves to be in that conversation. But the lines have basically been Jack Eichel centering the Tkachuk twins. And that line really was pretty quiet in this game, to be honest with you. But they had some, good moments in the preliminary round. You have Austin Matthews centering Boldy and Gensel. And I think that they've been okay, but probably better than okay. Gensel has not really maybe made his mark, and I think you think he would at some point. He's a guy that maybe that's just as a Ranger fan talking, because I've seen that a lot on the other side, at the other end of it. But that's that's your top six right there. I already kind of said your bottom six, which is Larkin has been with Tage Thompson and Kyle Connor. Then it was Clayton Keller. Again, sometimes it's Trocheck in a given game. It kind of changes. And then on defense, Jackson McCollum has been the defensive scratch full time, which kind of makes sense. He was a late addition for Seth Jones. Look, I still think that Adam Fox deserved to be on this team, understanding that, look, he'd be viewed upon as an offensive defenseman and not really there for his defense, even though I think that his defense isn't as horrible as it's made out to be. And I think it would have been easier to come on here after USA lost and be like, hey, not only do I think, and I've said this, that Miller and Trocheck shouldn't have been on there, but Fox should have. But when you win, it's tougher to kind of say those things, because I do think that Adam Fox's offensive ability, even though I know you have Quinn Hughes, who's unbelievable, you have Zach Werenski, like there are dynamic, ridiculously good offensive players on that back end. But I still think there was a place for Fox in this team. But I'll digress on that for now. That might be a conversation we come back to in a future episode. And the other pairs, I think for the most part it's been slaving with favor, although it seems like some inconsistencies there. And again, I'd like to see the ice time, but I think that for the most part it was Werenski with Sanderson and maybe Hannafin as the seventh defenseman. It's hard to tell at times whether it's Hannafin or Sanderson. I believe Hannafin is mostly the number 7. But again, they sort of, mix them in a lot more than Sweden does. Sweden, the approach by head coach Sam Hallman is just bizarre, where, Jesper Bratt didn't play for the first 2 periods. A guy that does have offensive juice, and Sweden needs that. He was noticeable in the third period, just simply didn't play. We've seen that in the tournament, where respected veterans like Philip Forsberg, I believe maybe Oliver Ekman Larson, I think it was him in game 1, like played 1 shift combined, just literally sat there the whole time. Now in this game, Victor Hedman apparently got hurt in warmups. So he was on the bench. That was a different situation. But that's unfortunate for Sweden, because if they had known that earlier, then you get Rasmus Anderson, who was healthy scratch, and you get him in the lineup. But that's, again, weird. We're at least with USA, even though I disagree with some of Sullivan's decisions, at least you try to mix people in who you have available to you instead of just leaving them cold on the bench. That's just hard to get behind that sort of philosophy. So, look, this is a matchup that you thought would happen a little bit later, but it happens now in the quarterfinals. And the goalie matchup is Connor Hellebuck and Jacob Markstrom. Connor Hellebuck, started 2 of the games in the preliminary round. The other one started by Jeremy Swayman, which was kind of a surprise. I figured Jake Ottinger would be ahead in the pecking order. As far as this game was concerned, Ottinger was the backup. Swayman was the healthy scratch. So, and I agree with that. But it's Hellebuck's net, by and large. That's just the way it is. And Hellebuck, this tournament, has done a decent job. Now, there is a lot of fair criticism to the fact that Hellebuck has not really gotten it done, right? He's not seen as this clutch goaltender. And that narrative is still up for debate, right? We will find that out more, in these, next two games, but Hellebuck, really has done a nice job, right? Like in this game, he allows one goal. I think he's looked good, right in terms of eye test. He's looked pretty good, but he's supposed to be. Connor Hellebuck, has he is one of the top goalies in the National Hockey League, and so he gets the net for USA. Not much debate there. And for Sweden, it was Jacob Markstrom, the New Jersey Devil goaltender, who really has had a very rough season, horribly for the New Jersey Devils. Veteran goalie who's had a lot of success in this league. He's been around for a long, long time. Really, since technically it was only one game he played, but he's been, in the NHL since 2010-11 with the Florida Panthers. Was with them for a few years, then went to the Vancouver Canucks for a long time, then Calgary, then the Devils. So, and I thought that he played a pretty good game. Now, obviously, if there's things, you're going to nitpick things a little bit when you lose, but Jacob Markstrom gave Sweden a chance to win. He got the start. The backup for them was Jesper Wallstedt, the Minnesota Wild goaltender, and Philip Gustafson as well. He also of Minnesota. He was actually the third goalie. He was actually the healthy scratch in this one, and he, I believe, got the first start. So their golden situation had changed, where I believe he had gotten the first start against Italy, if memory serves. But then it became Markstrom, and that's what it was. So first period, pretty uneventful. Kind of, in some ways it was almost like Ranger style. Sweden outshot USA 11-10 in the first. I felt like USA had the better of the play in let's just call it the first half or so. And then Sweden had the better of it. There was one penalty in the first. It was Gustav Forsling, 2 minutes for slashing. I believe his Florida Panther teammate Matthew Tkachuk, I believe, was on the receiving end of that. But USA doesn't score on the power play. Sweden kills it off. And eventually, I thought Sweden got to their game. And remember, they played the night before against Latvia, won handily, but there is that. Sweden was on a back-to-back. But yeah, this was ultimately overall an even period, but definitely I thought that play shifted towards Sweden's direction. Second period, it began with Sweden playing well. I thought first 5 minutes or so, I thought Sweden was the better team. But then USA really took over. This was by far the most impressive stretch for USA in this game was the second period. And it's been their best period in this tournament. And it was thanks to, I'll give Sullivan credit for this, because I'm kind of more critical of Sullivan than giving him praise. And maybe there's Ranger bias there, but I really think it's genuine. But give him credit. He moved up Jack Hughes. And again, maybe moved up's the wrong way to put it. But again, I kind of view that Larkin line. I do view that Larkin line as just as the head of the Brock Nelson line. And Hughes takes the spot filled by Clayton Keller. So it was Hughes with Larkin and Thompson. And it was a face-off win by Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin ends up getting the goal. At 11:03 of the second period, someone breaks the ice. And it's Team USA. It's Larkin off of a face-off win. And it's the Hughes brothers that get the assist, Jack and Quinn. And just a nice setup. And Jack Hughes is the one that takes the shot. And Dylan Larkin gains position, I believe, against Rasmus Dahlin, and is able to get his stick on the puck and pass Jacob Markstrom. And again, Quinn Hughes obviously is such a threat back there. His partner, Charlie McAvoy, was hitting everything in sight. I mean, really impressive stuff as far as physicality for the Long Island-born Charlie McAvoy in this one. But yeah, it is Larkin scoring his first goal of the tournament to give USA a 1-0 lead there. And from there, I thought USA really took over, dominated the second period. Hampus Lindholm takes a tripping penalty at 7-28. He tripped up Brock Nelson, but Team USA does not score. But they outshot Sweden 20-8 in that second period, and they were, looking like the better team going in the third. If there's one thing about Sweden, obviously losing Hedman hurts. I'm very impressed. Sweden's overall defenseman and just defensive game, I think, is really good. Now, goaltending can be questionable, but Jacob Markstrom played well. I don't think there's enough offensive firepower. However, Mika Zibanejad and Lucas Raymond have developed really good chemistry, and they're dangerous, and they are dangerous, right? So that ends up coming into fruition eventually. The third period, at 2:35, the one penalty taken by Team USA, you guessed it, Vincent Trocheck. He trips Gabriel Landeskog. He got away with it originally, and then he does it again, and they call it. how many times do I talk about stick infraction penalties by Vincent Trocheck all the time? And who knows how much longer he will be in New York Ranger. I believe that he will be traded by the March 6th trade deadline. That's just, again, not a bold guess there, but I think that it will happen. It's not definite because he does have 3 more years left on his deal. They could push this over to the off season or maybe next year, but I think he will be dealt. But Vincent Trocheck, who, look, I'm more fond of him than JT Miller. Let's get that clear. But Vincent Trocheck has his limitations. And again, just a really bad penalty. He got lucky. Sweden had very good chances. They were a little bit too pass happy and very much trying to force the play to Mika Zibanejad, that patented Zibanejad one-timer, which ends up coming through for them. They were trying to force that. Sweden had opportunities to shoot and didn't. And USA kills it off. So Trocheck is able to avoid that situation because that would have been a big talking point, but it wasn't. But USA just sat back way too much. And look, like, that's a team thing, but it's Mike Sullivan as well. I mean, they were trying not to lose. Sweden outshot USA 10-4 in the third after a dominant second period against a team that just played the night before. Now, I don't want to make too much of that because, again, Sweden won easily. It's not like they've been playing a crazy amount of games, but it's there. And yeah, USA, they were just trying to hold on. And that's a recipe for disaster. So I think in that sense, again, it's blame to go around, but again, Mike Sullivan it's part personnel decisions, although again, give him credit for the Jack Hughes move, but a lot of it goes to Bill Guerin as well in terms of building the roster. But I thought they sat back too much, and ultimately what happens, Sweden pulls the goalie, Jacob Markstrom is pulled, and on the ice is the Brock Nelson, JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck line, who, again, to me, it's overused. Like it's not as if those top 6 lines can't give you defense. It's not as if they're incapable. It feels as if, again, I think it's overrated. I think Brock Nelson's a very good 2-way player, right? But JT Miller has just not shown you enough. And, but yeah, they're force feeding those guys late minute time. And JT Miller is bumped off the puck by Mika Zibanejad. That is what led to the turn of possession. Miller had the puck with his back, basically with his head faced towards the U.S. net, if you could picture that. And Zibanejad, give him credit, just kind of roughs him up, pushes him around. This is Mika Zibanejad against JT Miller. And Sweden gains the puck. And then about 15, 20 seconds later, Zibanejad ties the game at 18:29 with 1:31 left. Zibanejad's third goal of the tournament from Raymond and Landeskog. And it was the patented Zibanejad one-time slapper that goes past Hellebuck. Hellebuck could not quite go from left to right in time. And Zibanejad, who was as excited as I can remember him in a long time, scores that goal. And Zibanejad has a knack for big goals. With Sweden, World Junior Championships, he scored the game-winning overtime goal for Sweden, I believe 2011. Or 2011 or 2012, give or take. And many with the Rangers. And look, how his career with the Rangers, how that's going to be evaluated, we'll discuss that at a later point. But it kind of reminded me, but it was not exactly the same, but an underrated clutch Zibanejad goal was Game 7 against the Penguins in 2022 Round 1. Where Panarin had the OT winner. Mika ties that game up with about 5 minutes left, ties it up. Now, obviously, this is a goalie pull. This is more like the Stadium Series against the Islanders at MetLife Stadium. So more similar here, there. But Mika ties it up with Trocheck and Miller on the ice, and Miller specifically playing a major role in fucking it up. And honestly, coverage as well. I feel like that was Miller's side, where Zibanejad had some free room on a great pass by Lucas Raymond as well. Ties it up at 1, and we go to overtime. Just like the last 2 games before, went to overtime as well. Vincent Trocheck actually takes the opening faceoff and loses it clean. Doesn't come back to bite him. He takes another faceoff and actually wins it. But it just goes to show you the trust that, and look, Vincent Trocheck obviously has the reputation as a great faceoff guy. I get that. But he does win that second one. Mika Zibanejad, he won a defensive zone draw. But the Rangers players don't end up, factoring into this overtime winner. It ends up being Quinn Hughes at 3:27 of overtime, scores his first goal of the tournament from Boldy and Matthews. So Boldy and Hughes, new teammates on Minnesota, kind of just a little easy, simple passing play between Boldy and Hughes with Matthews on as well. And And Hughes just finds the spot and snipes it past his former teammate in Vancouver, Jacob Markstrom, as well. So there's history there. So the Hughes brothers play a big role here, especially Quinn. And Quinn Hughes, he is really, really good. There's just no other way around it. I'm glad he's on a New Jersey Devil. Glad he's in the Western Conference. And, he is a special player. And, he is able to just find the right time. And he was kind of gassed. He was out there for a while. He stays on the ice and he gets the game winning goal. And now Team USA, they win the game. I feel really bad for Mika Zibanejad, where now he has to go back to the Rangers. It's like this was, sort of for any Ranger involved in this is sort of your last chance of, unless you're Vincent Trocheck and get traded this year, but of real, sort of competitive hockey where you may win something. So, they show Zibanejad on the bench with his head down. It's a tough feeling, but an admirable job nonetheless by Zibanejad. But, and off the hook to a degree is Miller and Trocheck. But USA wins this 2-1. And now their next game will be against Slovakia, who has been impressive. I think USA catches a little bit of a break here where they didn't catch a break in the Sweden matchup, right? That was a really, really ridiculously tough quarterfinal matchup. And here you could argue the way it lays out is Canada plays Finland and USA plays Slovakia. So in this sense, things are looking a little bit brighter for USA than maybe they did going into the quarterfinal where they had this tough Sweden matchup. Canada looked like they couldn't be stopped, and now they look human. Although I still think if Canada faced off with USA, even with Sidney Crosby potentially being hurt, and that's another thing maybe we'll discuss next episode if that matchup comes to be and what Crosby's status is. He had to leave the game against Czechia. I still like Canada versus USA in a head-to-head matchup, but anything can happen in one game. And, USA is going to be a pretty heavy favorite in Slovakia. I expect Slovakia to give it a good go here. Like, they've looked good. You can't take them lightly. I think Canada-Finland, that should be a good one. Finland always finds a way to get a medal. And yet again, it's looking like they very well will, right? You look at the 4 teams left. There's a good chance that Finland is going to get a medal of some sort. So those are your matchups. I haven't committed to it yet, but more than likely, I'll probably do a recap on Slovakia, USA. I'm thinking, more than likely. But again, not 100% yet that I will. But yeah, USA beats Sweden 2-1 in overtime. Really eventful game. Mika Zibanejad ties it up late with the goalie pull, but Quinn Hughes on 3-on-3 overtime is able to get the winner that gives USA the 2-1 win. They advance. They will now be playing for a medal. 4 teams left: Finland versus Canada, Slovakia versus USA in the semifinals of the 2026 Winter Olympics.